between the two.
Yeah, it's
within our radius of 100 miles, roughly.
Very much so.
Weighing it. Yeah.
So we are gonna, I've got some more statistics that we'll save here for a little bit, but we are gonna get started with you guys. I'm gonna start with you, Erica,
Okay.
and then I'm gonna let you introduce who's sitting next to you.
Well, it's the real story. I'm a Veterans Navigator, so that means that the state of Michigan has Walking with Warriors program that has veteran navigators like myself across the state. I think there are 17 of us right now. And our job is to find veterans in the community who are not connected to resources or need further connection to more resources. So for my specific role, I'm responsible for Livingston, Washtenaw, Monroe, and Lenawee counties. I've been looking at the populations, which is why I knew that Monroe had a bit more than 10,000. Those are a little bit of old digits, but
So
right
where
now,
are you getting your data? I don't mean to interrupt, but where?
from MDHHS,
Oh, okay.
from Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, because
Okay.
they collect the data through the census and give all those reports
Okay.
once a year. So we have to know who's in. And for my region, my 4 counties, I'm responsible for approximately 42,000 veterans, 42,300, something like that, in those 4 counties.
To help them get resources.
Well,
Is
the
that
ones
true?
that aren't connected, yeah.
Sure.
So, I mean, obviously I work with people who are connected, but my goal is to find those that aren't or that need further connection.
Right.
And right now, you know, in the 3 years that I've been in this job, I was hired on 9/11, and I love to say that because I'm coming up to my 3-year anniversary. It's been amazing to see the numbers of people that aren't connected.
Right.
You know,
I was
that
gonna
need
say, yeah.
further
Mhm.
connection. And obviously that's a lot of dealing with mental health, you know, and substance
Well,
use
they're too
kind
proud
of
to
thing.
ask, too.
Well, proud to ask and pride will kill you. You know, that's what I tell
Yeah.
a lot of the is that
Absolutely.
there's this weakness
I know.
mindset that if you ask for help that there's a problem, and
Mhm.
necessarily, you know, we have to address those issues. So
Mhm.
So-
and sitting oh god.
I'm sorry. So is the Veteran Navigator program connected to the VA?
It is not connected to the VA. We are a state program. We are actually funded. We're the only state in the union that has it. So we're really lucky because we're the only veteran navigator state, and we're getting some attention from SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse Mental Health Administration or Association, something like that. Because the navigator is specifically, I liken it to being a navigator. So this is my dad, and say he's got to go do something, go get something, go do, you know, as the navigator, I say, okay, then what do you need and how do we get there and what are the paths and do we have to make a stop, and then he decides and we go do this thing, and it's not leaving anybody alone, you know, to do it on their own, which is where people get lost.
Mm-hmm.
People get lost in trying to connect to resources. People get lost in knowing where to look for resources, and we try to walk them through that.
It's funny, and I don't, which am in Myers, and I can tell when I see a veteran, and I try
Yes.
to promote little blessings. And I have heard that of the resources that they don't know how to get them.
Yeah.
Or get whatever it is.
What are the
whether
what
it's
they
eye
need,
care
who they
or
look,
yeah, which is pretty sad, really.
It's very sad.
And I haven't, like, I'm not out there pushing it, but I do
Right.
thank you for your service, and hey, this is who we are, and
Yeah.
I'll try to give them a card, but it is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I'm sorry,
And
go
Drew,
ahead.
it's really interesting because I think that civilians that are in tune with a veteran, like you're married to one and I'm the spawn of one, I think that you do recognize that trait. There's a characteristic or a trait or something that you know about that does make it a little bit more apparent to people of our affiliation with
Right.
with the veteran. So that's the neat thing about the veteran navigators. We're not only there for the veteran, but we're also there for the military family members. So if you were to need some further connection to a resource, Drew, I would be able to support you because she's a veteran. So then if you needed some civilian connections, then we could go along and we
Right.
could do those things. Or your kids or
Sure.
your grandkids. Of course, you're a military family and your daughter's a veteran too. So
Billy.
Billy, did I say what I say?
Drew.
Why am I calling you Drew?
I thought that too. I was gonna let her know.
Why
about
am
it.
I calling you Drew? I'm so
thought
sorry.
I let her roll with it, thinking
You
it's
look
true.
like a Drew to
It's
me.
It's true. I let her go with the true, but I was coming back here. Yeah.
That's
I-
okay.
I love
Before
Drew,
she
but
said
I'm
it
not
anymore.
Drew.
I don't know where that came from.
That's so funny.
She works with a Drew.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's okay. I thought you said it's true, and I was letting her roll.
That's so funny.
we got her straight. Right. It's good. It's all
Billy!
good.
Yeah.
Billy, I'm sorry,
No,
now I got warm
you-
here all of a sudden.
Look at all the names you probably deal with as we all do, and it happens.
Right.
So this is my dad, Don Beam, and the reason I'm a navigator is because 30 years post-Vietnam, he needed some navigating. And we didn't know about it. And I'll let him tell what he wants to tell about that. But he's the reason why I know that veterans have a hard
How
time.
you got connected
That's
into your
right.
position.
That's right. And what comes along with that is when you start seeing progress and success and having some healing happen, well, then it's almost like you have a guilty knowledge. And when you see other folks
Sure.
having those same struggles, and we have been through some struggles, you almost feel like responsible to help them come through. And so that's how I became a navigator, through him.
Awesome.
Well, the part of healing from any traumatic situation is when you get to the point to where you can give back. That's the greatest gift of all in healing. And I believe in groups because that's what saved my life. We would talk in groups of 5 to 20 guys. Back 20 years ago when I first started on this journey with the VA. And we came up with solutions that you wouldn't think of or really didn't come from the academic world on how to handle things. And because we connected and didn't feel alone anymore, then that relieved some of the pressure to kind of get out and explore what is out there. And then you go, my God, there's so many things here. What's viable, what isn't? You know, I tried with the VA, I did with these people, it's all a bunch of bullshit, it's paperwork. You know, nobody's interested in me, they just want to pigeonhole me and put me in this area or that area, go around. So there's no human contact, you feel like, when you go and start this journey of getting help. And to have somebody there says, I will go with you, I will meet with you at the hospital or wherever, and take you in, you don't have to do it alone. Now you've taken away all that excuse that guys like me used. Well, I'll do it. Nah, you don't. You just go back and isolate again. So the navigation, the human navigation part of it, is so important. And she actually started on this 20 years ago with me, but coming up the institution, one of the institutions I was in for 8 weeks at a time. And she was around there enough that this is unusual, but actually the doctors brought her in, and the guys agreed to let a civilian in. We were all 24/7 in a one building. And so she got some ground information that very, very few therapists or anybody get. And from there, I got better, and I lost my job. But that was okay, because the government stepped in and took care of me after I got through the system. There was no navigation going on. It was just beat your way through when I got through the system. And from there, we took up with a friend that she introduced me to, a gentleman, and we got together and we got involved with the National Guard, and we was able to start up a program with them. And then shortly after that, her and myself and a judge started the first Veterans Court in the state of Michigan. So she comes from a background of growing up with this. On the ground floor with the Veterans Court, on the ground floor with the Michigan National Guard, working with the University of Michigan, Michigan State. So it's been a crash course that we've kind of gone through together.
A life-saving
Oh,
crash
definitely,
course.
definitely.
And not only for him, but for me, and then our family collectively.
Certainly.
Because he was able to acknowledge and accept the support that he didn't even know he needed for 30 years. You know, because this was 30 years post-Vietnam that he started this new journey that he's talking about that's 20 years in now. So.
And it was there's a lot of raw gut on my feeling. I decided to go back to Vietnam and took her and her brother, and we went back to Vietnam for 2.5 weeks.
When did you do that?
Facing up to that, 2004.
Mm.
And that was kind of something, 2 years before that, if you said I'd ever gone back to Vietnam, I'd say, no way in hell, you're crazy in hell, you know. I go
It
there
was
every
rough
night.
right up in leaving. I mean, right up to the day we got, even in
Well,
Vietnam.
So what led you to go back? I mean, for closure or just
No,
or,
I thought I'd lost part of my soul,
Mhm.
and I was going to go back, and it was all the wrong reasons. And I was going to go in a den, and one of us was going to come out alive.
Mhm.
You know, was going in a den with the devil, and one of us. So
Mhm.
that was the attitude I went over with. I was gonna go back and either find what I needed or die, basically.
Well, Billy, I think it's important to say that before we went to Vietnam, before he made the decision, so that was 04. In 98, he'd had what then was deemed a nervous breakdown on his way to work that started this whole ball of wax of going inpatient. He was inpatient at the Battle Creek VA anywhere from 3 to 38 weeks, I don't know, however many stays, but 12 times.
Wow.
He was inpatient. He likes to say most of those were voluntary.
Right.
Not all of them were voluntary. But then through that course of therapy was the group that he became a part of and started actually kind of leading at the Battle Creek VA. And then as a part of that group process, he decided he wanted to go redeem whatever it was that he didn't
Right, he
have
was
or
looking
something.
for
Yeah,
what- right, I
yeah,
got
whatever
you,
that
yeah.
was.
So she got to spend 2.5 weeks with, there was 18 of us?
Yeah.
All together.
Veterans, and then some of them had spouses and
And
some of
here-
them had children.
Oh, so a group of you went.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was
Oh,
wives
it
was
and
a whole
children,
tour
other
group.
I
children.
gotcha. Okay.
So what happened is it was kind of interesting because she would talk to the kids and go, my dad's the same way. And the wives would talk and say, well, my husband does the same stupid ass things. You know?
Right.
And so they didn't feel alone. There was a
Sure.
lot of
Camaraderie.
that was a
Right.
camaraderie that developed. I got to go back to 6 of my former battle sites. And the one that did the best for me was looking over there. And I remember the night before that we, you could tell when you're going to get into battle, the civilians would start disappearing. You know, you could just feel it. And we talked about it. Said, well, if I don't make it back, you know, you got to drink the beer that I would drink, and then you got to take care of the women I take care of, blah, blah, blah. And it dawned on me back there in Vietnam, when we're looking at, my job now was to live for them. And up to that, I was trying to die prior to that for them. And that was wrong. So that, plus was accepted. I got to sit down with an NBA officer that I fought against through the interpreter talk.
That story I would like to tell a little bit of. I mean, I don't want to take up a whole lot of his time, but that is what I think transitioned my brain and my thought process was we were in Hanoi, Vietnam, and we were going through what is now the Hanoi Hilton, former POW camp, now actually a 16-story
There's a
Hilton.
hill beside
Is
it, ironically.
Right there. But we were walking through the garden, and one of the gardeners approached our translator. He had recognized this 82nd Airborne that my dad had on and started talking with our translator. And through that conversation, they discovered that in the same year, on the same battlefield, those two men were opposing each other. And they didn't meet in 1968, but here they were, standing face to face, both of them gray hair, glasses,
Right.
and trembling. And they sat down, they hugged, cried, and sat down and parted as friends. 34 years later, or whatever
Something
it
like
was.
you see in the movies.
It was
Yeah.
life changing. There were 25 people standing there, and you could have heard a pin drop, but for their conversation. And not a dry eye around the place.
Right.
Sure.
And the only reason I can tell you now without crying is because it's so many years later, and I've told this story a number of times, but it's absolutely one of the pivotal moments of healing that understood, and at least I understood in my mind, that that's true forgiveness. That's true healing. And I tell people that he went back to Vietnam, and they're like, oh, no, not me. I am not. And I'm like, you don't know the kind of healing that can take place, you know?
But so we actually kind of stumbled on these things by ourselves. There was no
Yeah,
guidance, you know, starting up the Veterans Court, because at that point in time, giving back for any of us that have experienced that trauma, being able to come through enough to give back makes the whole thing worthwhile. And that's what happened to me, and that's why we got involved with the Guard, and why we got involved with the academic places and so on, because I was able to, first of all, I started trusting civilians, which I never did before.
Well, give the rundown of what you did when you came back, so it sounds familiar.
Well, and I want to add this too, because I say that all the time, right? Every veteran I've come in contact with, and when I'm talking to civilians, I will say every veteran I've come in contact with will tell you they don't trust and they don't like civilians. That
Right.
is a factual
Exactly.
statement, right?
Oh,
That is
that's-
factual.
Ignorant civilians,
That's
yeah.
extremely accurate.
Why is
A lot
that
of cases-
factual? So they can hear it from somebody other than myself. Why is it
Well,
factual?
because first it starts out, the recruiter tells you this, this, and this. That doesn't happen. Okay, so it starts day one. In my own case, if we went over, when we were over there, they said, "Well, there's blah blah blah," and we say, "Okay, yeah, there's no enemy out there. We go out and get our ass shot off." And another place, they'd say, "Oh, they're crawling all over the place. We go out there, there'd be nothing." So you can't believe what you hear, and then there's booby traps. So you can't believe only half of what you see, and then you come back and people, in my case, thank God it's not that way anymore, didn't want to talk to you, and you were a baby killer. So why would you trust anybody? I don't trust anything I hear, only half of what I see, and I'm not sure about you. And that's a survival thing for us at that point in time when we're in that state of mind. I talked to the IOF guys coming back, at the transition back, is they had kind of the same things with the recruiter and with the experience of what Intel said, and then thank God, that's why we were so adamant about welcoming these soldiers back, because we did not want them to come back to what we came to. So, why is that? There's a number of reasons. The whole military experience from the combat side, and that's all I experienced. I came back and I was a DI for advanced infantry training for a while. And it was very intense for me because I figured I only had one shot at these troops, and I felt empowered to do whatever it took to make sure that they learned how to set up that claymore or whatever it was. So it was very brutal, which is not so now, because I was down in Fort Gordon about 8 years ago advising on a training program down there. But and you lock in these men that I was with. I knew, and it probably been demonstrated, they would lay their life on the line for me, and I for them. I didn't even know for real if my own brother would do that, but this I absolutely knew. So not having much of a family life when I left the farm, because I didn't like it, and it was my mother and dad divorced and blah blah blah. So that was my first real family. And then 4 or 5 days before I come home, I said, wow, I gotta leave these guys. Some other poor bastard's gonna have to come in here and learn this, and hopefully he doesn't get killed until he learns how to survive like I have here for a year. Now you don't wanna leave. Now you come back. So you got this tug back there. My wife, I was married, so my wife says, no, you're not going back to Nam. I wanted to go back.
Tug.
Tug, yeah.
Tugging on you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to.
I left
that,
those guys.
that-
I left my family back
Sure,
there.
but that word, that terminology, tug, that's what I thought, but I just
Yeah.
wanted to take a
Yeah.
minute to get it,
So
tugging on you, right?
So that all gets kind of, and so who do you trust? So looking for resources, okay, do I have a problem? No, I don't have a problem because I'm 82nd Airborne, I'm Marine, I'm whatever, 75th. It's just, the whole training is to be able to plow through, to punch through, to continue to get through, and
Civilians don't have that training.
they don't have that training, don't understand it. So you come out, well, there must be something wrong with me. And so when I do say, okay, I really, I think I need some help. Well, are you suicidal? Blah, blah, blah. Those are the first 3 questions. Well, I don't want the cops crashing through my door, so I lie my ass off,
Right,
And he did.
right.
And then when I do get through there and get in, I tell the therapist, I think, whatever they want to hear.
Yeah.
And lead them
'Cause I
all
wanna
the
go
way.
home.
Yeah.
And some of them catch on, and a lot of them don't. I've played games. I go back and look through my records. I've had 24 different therapists, and I've run some therapists around in so many circles because
That's
I'm
absolutely
not
true. I've watched him
stupid.
walk therapists around a room.
So at what point, your first time, did you realize that you needed some help? That you could say to yourself, okay, I need some help.
When I woke up in a hospital, I had no idea how I got there. And lady walked in and said, "You have PTSD." What the hell's that?
Mhm.
You know, what
And
was
when
There was
this?
a whole lot leading up to that.
When was this?
February 3rd, 1998
Mm.
Yeah.
was
So,
the date.
on his way to work, he stopped at a gas station, worked there 27 years, knew his way,
31 years.
nonetheless.
Mhm.
Stopped at the gas station, and then couldn't get back in his truck. Gas station attendant called his brother called my mom and I knew where the gas station was, so I took my mom to the gas station. We got there, and he wasn't making any sense. He'd obviously been crying. He was all disheveled. He was a businessman. He made good money, offices in 6 countries of the world. He was going to work. He had mud on him. He'd been crying.
Where did you work at? What type of work? I was going to ask you that a while back, but
Yeah, for Max Steel. It's now part of Gerdau Steel.
Okay.
And I was involved with the first 40, 50 people that started that organization.
I gotcha.
We were worldwide.
mhm.
And he never made it to work that day. We took him to the local hospital, not knowing anything from anything, just what's going on with him.
Right.
And that night, we got a phone call the next day that said that the night before, he was put in a room next to the helipad, and Life Flight came in that night.
Wow. Right.
And when that happened, he flashed.
Mm-hmm.
So they called us and said, you need to take him to the VA. He has PTSD. And I'm not joking when I say to you, okay, I didn't know there was 5 branches of service. I didn't know what the VA was. I knew nothing at this time. And I thought they were telling me my dad had an STD. Not kidding. I thought they were telling me that he'd been doing some things that were really bad, and my mom was going to be.
How bad they were, but
I was gonna be man. Oh my gosh.
That was not what was going on at
Yeah.
all, and that began the journey that he talks about, the 20 years. I mean, it's actually like 22 now, but yeah.
But the VA actually saved my life. They got me up there and got me locked up there. And the doctor I had was a Korean War vet. So I trusted him.
right.
And that was the beginning of the journey. I trusted nobody else.
Mm-hmm.
I ran other people out of that room that I didn't trust. And so it just started, okay, there is one other person I can trust because he's been there. And then a few months later, I trusted another therapist. And a few months later, I trusted another one. And then finally figured out, okay, there can be some trust.
Sure.
there.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the most important thing when you come back and you're looking for resources is to find somebody you trust.
Trust.
And a navigator,
Trust. Nothing happens
right,
without trust.
nothing happens until you get that trust. And it takes time. So if you don't spend the time, okay, that person isn't interested, they're just doing a job. You know,
There's a window of
screw
opportunity
them.
too.
I'm out, yeah, that window of opportunity, my mind is open for that certain amount of time for a resource. Okay, now, I'll promise, I'll tell them what they want to hear. They'll say, screw it, I ain't gonna do any of it. But when you have a navigator that says, I will meet you there, I will take you there, I will do whatever, and they've listened to you, so you think they actually maybe do have some interest in me. So to verify that, maybe I got to meet with this person again and see what they do. But I'm going to be in charge, so I'm a navigator. So the whole thing is, and we work together on this. You're the captain of your ship.
I can't make you do
I'll
anything.
give you the resources. I can't make you do anything. You're the captain of your own ship. And after they talk about it long enough, they figure out and prioritize what their own problem is. You know, I should quit beating my wife, or I should quit doing whatever.
I should quit drinking. I should quit going to the,
Okay, I have
casino.
resources for that. So resources such as yourself or son, okay, I can put you in, I will go, I will introduce you. We call it the warm handoff. And that works.
But
to
I
go
don't
to-
ever hand off. I'm always over here.
Yeah.
Okay, you go off and do what you got to do. And if you run into another issue on down the road, give me a shout. Never do I only get one call. You know,
Right.
I mean, there's always another thing on down the road, and then we re-navigate, renegotiate, and they're off and running again.
So the whole thing with trust, I think that what you do is part of that bridge to gain trust, which gets you on a journey back to recovery in that type of thing. And I think it's different for different people. Some for it's fishing and so on. But it's the first thing that happens if you can develop trust. Now you generally will trust an animal, okay? A dog or something. I mean, I know a lot of guys that you don't mess with their dog. But the whole thing has to be based on trust and starts with trust, and that's what saved my life. Real short and simple.
Right.
It's none of of this is rocket science.
He's right.
And when you go to the typical therapist, you know, they're asking you questions. The first thing they're trying to do is pigeonhole you and see what drugs you have to take. And you know that's
That's true. That's
Honest
true.
to
What
God.
drugs? Which drugs make sense for you?
yeah. I've been on every friggin' drug there is. I can't even name all the drugs. But my particular case, every time I was put on drugs, I was in an inpatient facility. Because I remember one time they put me on Ativan and they let me out, and I went home. Went back after a week. Wife went with me, and she said, "I said we found the silver bullet, man. I'm good. I'm in a good spirit. I can sleep." Da 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 da. My wife says, "He fell on the refrigerator. He fell off the porch. He fell down the basement steps."
All of it's true.
Right.
And I'm going,
What?
"Oh." So they took me off that.
Good.
But I'm currently on nothing. I've been that way for 5 years, 7 years now.
That's
Good for you.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and he did the thing where he got so sick of the meds that when he came out one time, he was still on Prozac, and they wanted him to stay on the Prozac because he was going to do an outpatient treatment kind of thing, and he did for a while, and then decided he was not doing the Prozac anymore because and his words to me, I'll never forget him. I want to feel
I want to
something,
feel again.
Mm-hmm.
even if it's wrong. I want to feel it, and he took himself off cold turkey. That was really rough.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you know, I told the doctor I said I'm going to quit. I guess he didn't believe me or whatever. I went back after 2 weeks, and he says, "Don't ever do that." And I says, "Don't worry, I am never going to do that again." But you know, so what he told me then was, if you'd have been smart, okay, you'd have gone, you know, 2/3 a dose, half a dose, quarter.
Wean yourself, right?
Could wean yourself off from it. But I mean, I was too late then, but I was already through it. So the whole thing on resources, anything you get into to get a veteran started on a journey, in my opinion, back is to somehow develop trust at some level with them.
Well, you have to connect first, and that's what's great about the Navigator, and this is what he taught me, is that you have a window of opportunity to meet somebody in their space. In their space is key, and this COVID thing makes it really rough to do that, right? But we're finding ways anyway, because that ability to meet someone where they are and be there until they are okay to go on their own again, that connection piece. I don't care if I've only met you for 5 minutes. If you know I'm going to sit with you and cry with you, and 5 minutes later we're going to have a plan to talk tomorrow and maybe go forward on the next day,
And
that typically promotes forward progress.
it saves so much time.
It really
typically,
does.
say, well, I got an hour. Well, okay, I'm another number. So when the hour's over, okay, you got to meet with Dr. So-and-so to get the physical, blah, blah. But if you spend the time up front, as you go through it, when you hear their self-talk will bring you, okay, I need some help. And then their open suggestion, okay, there are some other things you can do for relaxation, you know, the equine therapy and that type of thing. So that now that becomes a possibility in my mind. Prior to that, it was all rhetoric. And I was all saying what you wanted to say because I didn't trust anybody. So
that's one of the key components that we do at our facility,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
I do it because I know, because I'm the veteran,
Yep.
right? And so somebody will say, where do the veterans come from? How do you get them here? Well, it's really word of mouth at this particular
Exactly.
point with our program, right? But we don't talk about the program. I invite them and their support system
Yep.
to the farm,
Exactly.
right? And we talk about space because the space is so critical to veterans, right?
Absolutely.
And it's got to be
Don't box me
safe.
in.
Yep, it's got to be safe. You have to be able to trust somebody.
Yep.
And so when they meet me at the farm, I don't talk about them. I don't ask about them.
Right.
I give them a little insight so they know where I've come from.
Start developing a connection.
Yes, so they can
Connection.
trust me,
Yes,
right? She
exactly.
served 25 years. She's deployed to Iraq. She knows some of these things, right? She's
Exactly.
speaking my language, right?
Absolutely.
And then you can just watch those barriers just crumble.
Fall.
And then they're like, and it's almost like a relief that you see, like,
Oh, it is really.
somebody,
Cleansing
right?
breath.
Somebody
Yeah.
I can connect with, right?
Yeah, I think it's a relief that they go, okay, here's something I wasn't expecting out here that is here.
Yeah. More than just the horses and the smell of manure.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
well, it's very important to like you say, to be cookie cuttered, or when you're going into these, that a person that's got all these plaques on the wall, but it's going to try to speak your language, or a veterans because they've never been there, done that type of thing, and I know that's very important.
The
And
setting is
any
extremely
type of
important.
treatment of any kind.
Yes.
And I also find though what is refreshing though for veterans that I encounter is that I am not a veteran. So when they actually establish a connection with a civilian, even though I'm just little old me over here in Lenawee County, it's somehow, and I've heard them say, well, then I knew I could trust a civilian.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
it's
It's a step in.
somehow, yeah.
She is the first for most of them
Right.
because she has, she'll sit down with combat as soon as you find out combat says, well, your sleep is lousy, and they go, and she tells them because she's been around so many of them,
Yeah.
Right.
and they go, well, how the hell does a civilian know all this about me? And now you're sucked in.
Right.
Now I got to find out. Is somebody doesn't trust? Now I got to find out how the hell she does
Right.
that. So it works. Like I say,
Saturation, that's the only way I know it. I've been saturated.
Yeah.
There's so
It's a
many
good
of
way
you
to put
that
it.
have the same. It's a natural response,
So
right?
and a lot of veterans say, I don't trust any civilian, and I try and knock that barrier down and say, look, I understand, but you can't trust some.
Right.
I've
You
been
haven't
there,
met that
I've
one
done it.
yet,
And then
or
after they hear my story and say, well, okay, well, if you went through that and trust a civilian, well, okay, that maybe opens up their mind to looking for one.
sure.
Well, what we learned, go ahead, Jamie.
No, I was just gonna say, what is so amazing about you is, like, I didn't know your story about your dad. This is the first time that I've heard your dad speak. But we met at a VCAT meeting.
Yep.
And then we met a couple different times,
Yep.
and we connected like instantaneously.
Instantly, yep.
Yeah. And I really do appreciate the fact when a civilian really has that true understanding, right?
You know how much I know I'm getting interviewed? Like when we had lunch at that, I know what you're going to ask me before we ever sit down. I know what you're going to be looking for, and all I got to do is eat my meal and spew what you need to hear. And you bought.
Yes,
it
I
was
did.
great. It was
Yes, I
great.
did.
I
Yeah.
enjoyed it, and I was really, and I'm so grateful for it because it's not rocket science. It's not. It's human. It's connection. It's.
Yeah, but you say it's not rocket science, but you're the daughter, right?
Yeah.
You're
Being special forces, I say.
You are personally connected, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
somebody who is not personally
Right.
connected, it is rocket science, right? They
It
don't.
seems like it.
There is, because they have, I talked about this a little bit last week. There's expectations when veterans go into the civilian sector, right? So, we're going to get a veteran and they're going to be great at their job, right? Well, if they're not told the details of their job, right? Because the veteran wants the details of their
About
job.
6 months later, yeah.
Right. Then the employer is highly disappointed, right?
Yeah.
And then the veteran is very frustrated,
Yeah.
right?
Very typical.
And or when the veteran goes in and they're like, "Oh, you're crazy," and so the civilian populace puts this expectation, one way or the other,
Right.
on the veterans.
Absolutely. And
You
it's
know?
come meet me, come to me, come do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which, getting a veteran out of their space, Billy, I mean, it can be really rough, right? Getting them to do things that even they want to do sometimes. And so when you have a service that's set up that says you have to come here, unless you do like you, where you're saying, hey, come meet me here, and we will go through this service together. We will walk through. I have to have veterans meet me at the VA, or sometimes I even take them. But I will meet them in the parking lot, and I tell them, okay, when you get there, it's probably going to be a full parking lot. So go all the way up to the 3rd floor. Don't even mess around those other floors, just park at the top. I'll meet you up there. And then, literally walk them through the thing. Because telling people to just do something in the veteran community, I mean, I'm just not going to get anywhere with that. I'm just
No.
not.
Well, I remember when they said we got to go to the VA. I can't remember. I remember my last involvement with the government. You go to hell.
I just want to clarify on our show, we are not VA bashing.
No, not at all.
The
Not at all.
VA, the VA saved my life.
Yes.
It did.
And
But like any large organization, being it a medical field, the manufacturing or whatever it is, when you have large organizations, you have things you have to negotiate. And it's not the VA is. I've been in the VA system since 1978. I have nothing good to say about it. Have we had some problems? Yeah, I've had some problems, but I would say on the whole, I have less problems by far than I would in the civilian system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So no, I am pro VA. They say they saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that simple.
And I've watched them save dozens and dozens of others just in our own little circle.
Mm-hmm. And it's, you know, and the counselors who want to participate and want to be part of the VA system, right? God love them, right?
Absolutely.
But we know that that's a frustrating part. I know my very first connection when I said, okay, I need to connect with the VA, right? The very first counselor I had, he was an Army veteran. And I thought I struck gold because he spoke my language,
Yep,
right?
Exactly.
And then I got handed off.
Yep. And then they got handed
And
off
then
again.
the person I got
Yeah.
handed off to did not speak anything.
Yeah.
And I was frustrated because I had to tell my story again.
When
And I was
you
like,
gotta tell
oh,
your story, and you gotta change your language, or you have to educate them about the language, and
Yeah.
what you have to stop and say. This is what a private is. This is what a MOS. You know, I mean, when you have to do that, then you begin to wonder who's helping who here. What, you know,
Yeah, right.
how
Yeah.
does this really?
And you really do feel like a number.
The
You're like,
revolving door
next,
thing is
next,
Yeah.
next.
Yeah, that's
And
why
it's
I
so
don't work for the
disappointing.
VA.
Yeah, it's so disappointing. But they do really, they do. God love
Absolutely,
them. You know?
absolutely.
After 20 years of being in the VA system, in a lot of VA systems, as a matter of fact, different varies, I wholeheartedly believe that at least 90% of those people could be working in a civilian job, making more money with less frustration.
Oh,
That 90% is totally dedicated. The other 10% are students getting rid of their loans, which is fine, you know, whatever. But it's like in any organization, that those people figure out ways to beat the system to help us on a regular
They do.
basis.
They're really
So
really good care when you get
yeah.
into the VA. Now, getting to the VA is not a friendly process.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I am most beneficial.
Mhm.
Once we get somebody through the process of accepting that they need to reach out to the VA or that they need to access the VA, I mean, that's a whole thing in and of itself. But once you get them in,
Mhm.
it seems like there's light shining all of a sudden, and now some things are starting to jive and make sense. And sure, there's some hiccups, but at least now there's a network
Right.
or a system or a community of being involved that helps.
and if you have a navigator, when you hit that, you go, oh, that's okay. And it's just other person that knows nothing. I go, what the hell are you telling me? I've run across this joke. I run across one. Okay, with a navigator, if you made that connection, you say, okay, there you can request another one. I'll go back with you to Spain another or whatever. The retention for the first two, we've had people that have come back out 3 times out of the VA and said, I'm done.
Not going back.
But we've got them all back.
Well, and also, you know, when you're going into a system like that and you're already alert, because if they've come to me, it's because there's something going on and they're already on charge, right? So then we go in there and they don't want to be there, and so there's all this input that when they actually get to a conversation about whatever it is they're there for, their input is very minimal.
Well, by the time you get
The
there,
absorption is not available.
you're in a cubicle with your, with your back to the door, somebody you don't know asking you questions, and you're closed in.
So
There's
as
only
the-
one way out of that room.
As the navigator, I can take in information and I can reiterate later when their nervous system is calmed down
Right.
what was said, what
Actually.
information they need to have, and then the next day I can follow up and say, so you remember, and you would not. I mean, maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but I was surprised at how many people don't remember what so and so said. They just
No.
don't have that information available.
When you're on
Yeah.
God, the word just left me.
Hypervigilance.
Hypervigilance, you have very little room left for input.
Oh yeah, you're not paying any attention. I had to go, I don't know, somewhere up near Detroit for
Oh,
an evaluation, right?
Yeah.
A psych evaluation.
Yeah, this person
And-
is going to make an evaluation on me. My future depends on it. I don't know him. Because my future pay is here.
Is he in your brain?
Yeah, you walk in, you shut the door, right? Your back's to the door, and you're like this, and they're like,
Exactly.
"Are you all right? Yeah, I'm great." Can we just like
Still, I
speed
am.
this up? You know,
Can we
you
just
want me
get
to open
through
the
your
door? No,
questionnaire,
I want
please?
you to hurry this up so I can get out the door,
Yeah.
right? I don't want,
So settling,
Yeah.
whatever you use to settle down that central nervous system, which in your work, that does that. That's very essential at that time to get through those things. But it's much easier to get through those things because you're taught that in the military, the buddy system.
Right.
You just and when you come out, just put it on your own. It just,
Mhm.
or you feel that way, whether you are or not. You know, perception is 90% of it too. Because I found out that a lot of ideas I had absolutely weren't true, but you know, that's what you act on.
Right. So I want to touch on a very sensitive subject that, everybody tippy toes around and does not like to talk about is the suicide, right?
Mhm.
So I want your perspective of what you've seen over the years and how you view what is happening. I know that's kind of like a deep question, but
Suicide thing comes from just complete lack of hope, of course. How do you get there? You know, when I started on a journey, and that's one thing that I have seen a lot of, because I've been in therapy with over 240 other guys, long term, 8 weeks, 10 weeks at a time. So I've seen the variety, but I've seen the common waves that you go through. So a lot of times it can happen. You can come in and say, okay, I'm back sleeping with 29. In my particular case, there was 30 of us in one building, people that have my back. So now I can sleep.
That was his first noticeable progress when he had his nervous breakdown. Was that when we went to visit him, and he was able to talk, he said, I have slept for the first time in 30 years. I didn't know at the time number one, that he hadn't been sleeping, and number two, that because he's in this place now, what I thought at the time was an insane asylum,
right.
because I didn't know anything, he's able to sleep.
Mhm.
What is that about?
Mm-hmm.
But just now we know sleep is so huge.
Right.
And wasn't until he was inpatient against his will for the first time
Mm-hmm.
that he was able to sleep for the first time.
So for about 6 months, everything progressed. Okay, I began to get hope. And then, we all have bad days. And then with my wife, it come up, well, for example, therapist come into me one time. He says, okay, your family's coming in. I've invited them in. Now, what have you told them about what you've done? You ever told them about your experience? Oh, yeah. Blah, blah, blah. So they all come in. He sits there and says, well, what did Don tell you about Vietnam?
I thought he had a radio. I thought he was like listening to the radio. There's actually a picture of him listening to the radio. I didn't know he was the radio telephone operator, forward observer in the jungles of Vietnam. I just thought he was listening to the radio.
Right.
And there's a picture of him with some tinsel Christmas tree, doing this and listening to the radio too. So it just validated for me that he was over someplace listening to a radio.
Mhm.
I don't know.
So this realization, there's a huge chasm in your life, and can I overcome it? And it looked too big to overcome. And then, it did happen. I desperately wanted to share it with my wife, and she wanted nothing to do with it. So
She couldn't handle it.
yeah,
She couldn't. She was married to him 3 days before he left. And they wrote letters to and from each other while he was over there, and she wanted that shit put away. And here he was 30 years later digging back into it, and she wanted it to be stayed put away.
Mm-hmm.
so it was like I hit a wall and lost hope again. So it was the suicide. The whole world would be better off without me. So my point is that even though when you get in and start the journey, you need somebody you trust continuously. And the problem with the VA is, and I was fortunate enough and I had the same doctors through that period of time. But if I'd have got handed off, I think it would have been a different outcome.
Right.
Yeah, I think
I
so
think
too.
it would have been a whole different outcome.
I think so too.
So,
Sure.
so again, it's being from my perspective on a suicide is that it comes from loss of hope, but the continuous thread, there needs to be some continuous thread with a pact with somebody to make sure you get through that first year or two until you can say, okay, yeah, sure, it's on my mind, I've thought about it. You learn the difference between ideation and can talk about it. It's not
Taboo or
Well, that's the
it's
thing.
not taboo because
I think it's important to distinguish that there are phases of suicide. that there is ideation and active and, prevention. And there's all these
The plan.
buzz terms, but when you actually start developing a plan and that's when you really need to be talking the most, and that's not when people, but if you get a hold of the wrong therapist and you tell them you have a plan, they're going to lock you up.
Right.
And that doesn't allow trust,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if there's a plan in action, now you know the level of suicidality that you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
But I think right now we're dealing with a lot of non-combat suicides, non-deployed suicides that are not going to the VA because they don't believe they're eligible, or they, in fact, maybe are not eligible because they weren't deployed and they don't have combat distinction, which we find more often than not doesn't determine whether or not they're eligible, but at least they think that it is, so they don't reach out for this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that right now, at least for my little tidbit about the suicide, is that we're focusing on suicide and combat veterans, which may or may not be a problem that we need to look at. I mean, I know that any suicide is a problem we need to look at,
Mm-hmm.
but it's significantly higher in the non-combat community, and that's not what people think. People think that those are different
Right.
digits. They think those digits are on their head.
Sure.
We're learning quickly that it's the
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I just
No,
wanted to. So I wanted to pull this up because I was in the guard, right? So guard members don't really count,
right.
right?
I mean,
you got
reserve
one
members-
foot in each world.
Reserve members don't really count with these statistical numbers, right? As sad as it is, and so
Air Force just surpassed the Marine Corps, right?
yes, and I'm trying to see. In addition, what do they say? There was 900, and I think this was in 2017 again, the latest statistics that we have, right? And 919 suicides among federally activated. So this is the people that are in, right? And then they had talked about the National Guard and the Reserve as an average of 2.5 because they add to those numbers, right? I have it right here. Just hold on one second.
Well, like you said too, when I don't know where you were at, but when you said about being in a guard, it was more like, well, that ain't the same. Or when people that go over
Active duty.
yeah, even though they only went over there for, let's say, 4 months or whatever. With Jamie was Iraq, 2 tours in Iraq. She was gone, how long was it long? 100 and freaking some day. She was always first to go and last to leave just because she was so military. She would go help set up, tear down. Which I found unfair, but that's who she was and how she was treated. But some people look down. Well, you don't know what it is to, as being away from your family or whatever. Remember how you were explaining that?
Yeah. I think,
Which is pretty unfair, really.
Yeah,
It is, because when active come back, they go to a base with their wives, they know family, they know people there, they go back in. But the guard's you got 1 foot in each world. You come back off from the guard, you get your 30 days, and you go back to work and everything. Oh, you're back to work. Well, thank God. Now our load gets back there, and your employer goes, "Geez, I got to deal with. I don't know when they're going to be gone again." The guard is, to me, in my experience with the guard, has been it's a lot tougher than being straight active all the time.
Right, because
I think so too.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think Guard or Reserve in Michigan is especially so because we don't have an active military base here. We are strictly Guard and Reserve. I mean, there are those bases that have some of the, but we don't have the full military base. Grayling is a thing, and they got Fort Custer and whole things like that, but not an active base
You
like
go back
you
to
have.
an active base, you have babysitters,
Yeah.
have all that stuff available. The guard, you come home and say, "Well, welcome home. Go back to work."
Well, yeah, and like their base did so well on all their testings, all their inspections, so they were at the very high end. So they got a lot, the way I viewed it over the course for career, they were sent out more.
right.
Well, do good and you'll get
to
more
Turkey, to
Right.
Turkey, you know
Yeah.
what I mean.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I found the statistics. So it says the report shows that in 2018, 541 service members across military, active, and reserve components died by suicide. Within the active component, the suicide rate was 24.8 per 100,000. In the service reserves, the suicide rate was in 2018 was 22.9 per 100,000, and in the National Guard, it was 0.6 per 100,000. So people get really confused and
Yes.
say, "Oh, you're just the guard. You're just
Yes.
the guard,"
Oh,
and that's not it
absolutely.
because, you know, it doesn't matter with the guard. And I had I was full-time guard. I was just a guardsman, and I don't mean to say just a guardsman,
No, right.
but that's what they say, right?
Right.
So I was
Regular.
a weekend warrior, right?
Mhm.
But that does not change who you are because you still have to abide by all of those.
Right.
You fall under that guidance. So 2 days a month, those other 28 days a month, I'm still militant,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Especially after all those years.
Yep.
And so it's, you're trying to fit into the civilian sector, right? And it's apples and oranges, right?
It is.
It
Yeah,
really
it
is.
definitely really is.
But people
Definitely.
think that, it's
You got a maid or
combat
whatever,
veterans, right? Like you said before, and they don't take any account into the reserve and the guard components of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And something that's, we have chaplains, I'll say, in the Guard with 13, 14 years done death notifications, and they don't qualify for benefits because there's not 24 months of active duty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your educational benefits. I mean, as a guy-
What?
Yeah.
How does that equate,
Well,
you
And
know?
Yeah,
speaking of that,
that's
how,
the stuff
what,
that
what
doesn't-
really pisses me off is that, she got in there at 18, 19 years old, put her 20 some years in, got out at 48 years old, and has to wait till 60 to get any benefits.
Yep.
And people don't even get that. It's like, what? And when
How
she
does
told me that, I was like, how does that work? You did Iraq, all this, not much special
Yep.
treatment, but you've retired, and now you're telling me now we lost all the benefits, whatever. She don't get any retirement. How many people, like at, 40 to 20 years,
Yeah.
die or whatever, God forbid,
Absolutely,
before they even
absolutely.
get to cash in on that money or
It-
benefits.
Yeah.
That ain't right. That ain't wrote right. Whoever wrote that program, Trump needs to
There's
get on
a
that
bunch
shit.
of
It ain't
shit
right,
ain't
man.
wrote right.
There's a lot of stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
Like
it don't make
education.
sense though. Really, it really.
She'd have to
That
be
makes
employed
sense.
48 months to get 4 years worth of college education benefits.
Mhm.
If I go in the regular Army or Air Force for 4 years, get up, I get full benefits whether I'm
Mhm.
deployed or not. She has to be overseas
Mhm.
in the Guard to accrue educational benefits.
Right.
And we experienced that with our youngest daughter who went
Oh,
to a school. She used all my post 9/11, right? And we were I was 6 months shy of her getting 100% of her tuition paid for, right? 6 months. I'm like, put me on active duty somewhere for 6
Exactly.
months,
Right.
right? For the
Exactly.
whole 4 years she was in college.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's right there,
Yeah.
He applied for benefits 8 months too late. So I was 26 years and 8 months when he applied for benefits. If he would have applied for benefits 8 months earlier, I would have gotten my college paid for.
Well, that took me 5 years
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
my benefits.
That's a whole nother thing too.
Yeah, that's a whole other
when
thing.
I went to apply for my daughters, right?
Yeah.
They're like, well, you have to give us another 3 years. Another 3 years? What do you mean another 3 years? I just gave you 20. They're like, in order to receive these benefits, these post 9/11 benefits, you got to give us 3 more years. I was like, and now it's some ridiculous number, like 8 years or something.
Oh my
I don't,
gosh.
yeah.
It's gotten worse.
Well, you guys, I absolutely loved having you. I know we have eaten this hour up so fast. I definitely want
It
to
was
have
an
you guys.
hour?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Holy
I don't know who's on a
Well,
something.
I know your name is Billy now.
Yes.
Sorry.
So you were married 3 weeks before
No,
you?
no, got married on Saturday and Monday I left.
Monday left. How long did you know each other prior to that?
Oh, 3 years.
3 years? Oh, okay. Because Deb's was pretty quick too when you heard
Yeah,
that. I didn't
yeah.
realize that either.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
the
it was-
interesting little thing I want to say about that my mom says is, that her groom left,
All right.
but he never come home.
Right.
Oh, right.
His
Yeah.
brown eyes came home,
It said, yeah.
and she's
Right.
hung on to
I've
those
heard that.
Right.
those brown
Yeah.
eyes.
When they, yeah.
Well, Don, I give you the utmost respect
Yeah,
for
thank
your
you for your
service.
service.
Thank you so much for your service. Thank you
My
so
honor.
much for sharing bits and pieces of your story and your journey. Erica, thank you for bringing him
Of
here
course.
and what
Anytime.
you do.
I haul
Yeah.
him around with me everywhere I go because he really is the reason. And he connects better with the veteran. I connect better with the family.
Well, we're definitely going to have the two of you on again because
Sure.
it was.
Yeah.
Awesome.
that-
There's
since
just
there
too
was
much
one-
to talk
yeah,
about.
right.
So
Glad
we're
to
going to have to
come.
divide this into segments next
Mhm,
time.
Right.
Well, thank you guys so much, and God bless everybody, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks.